Chapter 14. Although unsupervised sim training was officially forbidden, the better pupils were allowed to spend some time on their own, provided no instructor actually saw any frivolous acrobatics or interstellar warfare. It wasn't unusual for Steve to fill an evening going through manoeuvres or some esoteric traffic management, but this time he felt apprehensive as he put on the headset. The sim death had had far deeper effects on him than he'd expected, and as the familiar screens and scanners appeared, he shivered. He realised just how powerful direct neural access was. Piping pictures and feelings directly into the nervous system seemed like a particularly good way of interfacing to the computers, but there was no barrier, no way to close your eyes if something went wrong. Of course, there were safeguards built into the computer, but if Nick's special program was in place, the pranksters trying to get access would switch the sim into diagnostics, where the computer stopped showing a deep space simulation and gave him direct neural access to its internal workings. This was a mode designed for experienced comp engineers, and not something a cadet should use. He had stumbled across it before, and Nick knew it, otherwise he wouldn't have let Steve get into anything so powerful and potentially dangerous. The session started well enough. Steve decided to try a famously difficult rescue, the Calamus Major incident, picking up a stranded spaceman from within a ring system full of very dense metallic rock. To add to the problems, the planet around which the rings orbited wasn't as placid as Saturn. Instead, it emitted fearsome amounts of magnetic and hard radiation. It was a good one. Halfway into the scenario, the space around him faded to black. Instead of thousands of rainbow points of light and buzzing radiation monitors, a control panel appeared in front of his computer-simulated hands, and apparently 2 feet away from his face, a meter-wide cube containing spheres of many different colours. File space. He lifted a hand and pushed it into the cube, feeling different textures in the spheres. Each sphere was a subunit of file space, and as he watched, they grew, shrank, combined, or split. He was sensing the overall structure of the Academy computer, which must have meant that Nick had given him an override privilege. "Thanks," he muttered, as he looked around for what had triggered diagnostic mode. He wondered what the current file space for the system was, and the cube exploded around him. He was drawn inwards at an impossible speed until he and his control panel was floating in front of a football-sized sphere. He looked at the panel, which was, thoughtfully, set to novice. As he wondered how to do something, the information was seemingly recalled from his own memory, although he knew that the computer was merely pretending. So, to inspect file linkage, he knew that he had to set Inter-File Com Pipe Display. He was already thinking of it as IFCPD, and a network of lines began to gradually fade into the sphere. Another thought, and the internal structure of the simulator's file space became visible. By now, the world around him was a gaudily coloured mess of shapes, which he found distracting. He tried to find any evidence that Nick was online, but there was no sign of any system monitoring. But then, there wouldn't be. He was sure that Nick would have made anything that was too interesting quite invisible. To business, and finding out what had triggered the diagnostics. He checked all the file linkage, there was nothing amiss there. As he cleared each glowing feature of the insides of the computer, he turned off its diagnostic display. Slowly, the picture simplified. He was left with the simulator file space and not a lot else. There was nothing visible which could account for someone sneaking a look at his data. A different approach was needed. He asked the computer to find any duplicates. Even for the Academy computer, this was a major request. For the first time, a feeling of patience came over Steve, which meant that the command would take some time. The display came alive as flickering lines spread out, probing through the entire file space. Success. The computer had matched a file. It was in another simulator, currently logged to Geller. Gotcha. But how did she come to have a copy of his simulator traces when there was no file link? The only way was if she had a system-level link in place, something that he couldn't check because he didn't have enough privileges. But for her to have that sort of power would mean that she could access almost anything on the system. That was a serious matter. He'd better make a record of what he found and then get back to Nick as soon as possible. He went to the control unit and requested that a copy of the trace from his diagnostic session be sent to the system manager. As he did so, the false world of colour and space shimmered and faded to black. He gave the command to leave diagnostic mode, to return to the standard sim. Nothing. Emergency abort. Quit now. Nothing. And then a chilling voice. "I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that." A standard joke among comp engineer students, that line from the dawn of computer time was often used to booby-trap a terminal, so that any reasonable request was met by an apparently schizophrenic computer. But here in the darkness of an uncontrolled sim, it was as frightening to Steve as it was in the film to the spaceman who'd first heard it. "Geller?" he shouted. "Geller, a joke's a joke, but meddling with Sims is dangerous." "For whom, Starboy?" the voice came back. "You know you shouldn't be playing with diagnostics. You're not trained. Anything could happen." Or worse, you could be a neural access freak, sneaking off to an illicit sim session. They drag corpses out of sims all the time. Sometimes they're smiling and sometimes they're not. He was falling, gripped by vertigo through the space that he'd been playing the simulation in. Again, he tried to command the sim to return him to normality, but the controls were dead. He couldn't get out, but the circuits into his brain were still very much alive. Even as he tried to orientate himself, the falling feeling was familiar somehow, but he put that down to the malfunctioning computer. Around him, the rocks of the ring system glittered and span. His suit appeared, followed by jetpack controls and intercom as Geller added more detail to the sim. The radio spoke. "You were doing so well in the Calamus sim. I know you'll appreciate a real challenge. After all, nobody's ever been the spaceman before. Have fun now. Oh, one last thing before you go," and went dead.